Welcome to Hockey Whiz Talks podcast. In this podcast, I'll be previewing the Atlantic Division in the NHL. In this podcast, I preview the Atlantic Division teams based on the order I think they will finish in the standings, from best to worst. The Florida Panthers are fresh off their first Stanley Cup victory in franchise history and have been busy this offseason making key decisions to try and maintain their championship core. The Panthers locked up a key piece of their future by extending Sam Reinhart to a long-term contract for 8 years at $8.63 million per year. They also secured young star center Anton Lundell for 6 years at $5 million per year. Florida also brought back defenseman Dmitry Kulikov for 4 more years at $1.15 million per season. The Panthers added some key pieces in free agency to replace some of their departed free agents like Nate Schmidt, Adam Boqvist, Jesper Boqvist, and Thomas Nosek. The Panthers may go through a bit of a struggle initially as they lost many key players that were a part of their championship team, such as Brandon Montour, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson. As per Daily Faceoff, Alexander Barkov centers the first line with Carter Verhaeghe and Sam Reinhart, while Matthew Tkachuk plays on the second line with Sam Bennett and Evan Rodriguez. Florida's top six is as good as any team in the NHL and has proven itself to be elite in all aspects of the game. Anton Lundell centers the third line with Eetu Listerainen and rookie Maki Samoskevich. This line is the one to watch this season. The fourth line is now made up of new players and is still a work in progress, but as of right now, they have Thomas Nosek centering Jesper Boqvist and Mackenzie Entwistle. The Florida Panthers still have the same shutdown pair of Gustav Forsling and Aaron Ekblad. This pair did wonders for the Panthers all of last season and should continue to do so. Dmitry Kulikov and Niko Mikkola are now the second pair for the Panthers, and the rest of the defense is a work in progress, with Ivo Balinkis, Nate Schmidt, Jacob Megna, and Adam Boqvist vying for a spot on their third pair. The weakness of the Panthers heading into the season is their defensive depth, as they no longer have the same defensive depth as last year. Fortunately for the Panthers, they have Sergei Bobrovsky in net, who will be able to patch the weakness of the defense. Spencer Knight will be the backup to Bobrovsky, and he may play more than most people anticipate because Bobrovsky is 35, and they may want to preserve him for the playoffs. Because of the large roster turnover on Florida, I think the Panthers should still make the playoffs. I don't know if they will be as dominant as they were last year because they lost many key pieces of the team. With that said, at this moment in time, Florida should still be the best team in the Atlantic because they still have their core intact, so they should still finish first in the division. The Boston Bruins have been busy this offseason, making some big splashes in free agency to address their need for a top 6 center and to improve their defense. They signed Elias Lindholm to a 7-year, $54.25 million contract. He's expected to be a key contributor at center, potentially alongside David Pastrnak. Another high-profile free agent signing for Boston was Nikita Zadorov, who signed a 6-year, $30 million contract to bolster Boston's D-core. He brings a physical presence as a top 4 defenseman. The Bruins still need to re-sign goaltender Jeremy Swayman, who is still a restricted free agent. With the remaining cap space around $10.2 million, negotiations for his contract are a key point of focus. As per Daily Faceoff, David Pastrnak is slotted to play alongside new center Elias Lindholm and Pavel Zacha, who slides on over to the left wing, while Morgan Geekie will be the right wing alongside Charlie Coyle and Brad Marchand. The top 6 of the Bruins is pretty solid, with the addition of Elias Lindholm, and adds lots of firepower to the lineup. Matthew Poitras, who had a solid rookie year, centers the third line with Trent Frederick on his left and Justin Brazeau on his right. The fourth line is composed of gritty wingers Max Jones and Mark Kastelik, with a young up-and-coming center and John Beecher. The most obvious weakness of the Bruins is depth scoring, and they really need to add a third line right wing to play alongside Poitras and Frederick. The defense of the Bruins is anchored by Charlie McAvoy. He is paired with Nikita Zadorov, while Hampus Lindholm, another staple of the D-core, is paired with Brandon Carlo. Mason Lohrei, who really broke out last year, is paired with Andrew Andrew Peak on the third pair. The defense is looking pretty solid and is the strength of the team, along with the goaltending tandem of Jeremy Swayman and Jonas Korpisalo. This should be enough to make the Boston Bruins a contending team again. The Boston Bruins' success will likely depend on the development of young players like Matthew Poitras and Morgan Geekie, strong goaltending from Jeremy Swayman, and the performance of established stars like David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, and Elias Lindholm. Predicting their exact finish is difficult, but they should be a competitive team in the Atlantic Division. Ultimately, they should compete with the Toronto Maple Leafs and Tampa Bay Lightning to be the second best team in the division. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my scouting blog at hockeywiz777scouting.com. Listen to my scouting blog podcast on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/hockeywiz777scouting. The Toronto Maple Leafs have had a busy offseason, signing multiple free agents including defenseman Chris Tanev to a 6-year $27 million contract and Oliver Ekman-Larsson to a 4-year $14 million contract. They also re-signed a couple of their own free agents, including forward Max Domi to a 4-year $15 million contract, defenseman Timothy Liljegren to a 2-year $6 million contract, and goaltender Joseph Woll to a 3-year $10.98 million contract. The Maple Leafs also added Jani Hakanpää and Anthony Stolarz on 2-year deals. Toronto still has 2 RFAs to re-sign, Nicholas Robertson and Connor Dewar. With how low the Maple Leafs are in cap space, they may have to make a trade or two to make the team cap compliant. As per Daily Faceoff, Austin Matthews centers the first line with Mitch Marner and Matthew Knies, while John Tavares centers the second line with William Nylander and Bobby McCann. The top 6 of the Leafs is the strength of the team and is among the best in the league. For that reason, they will once again be one of the highest scoring teams in the league. The third line is centered by Max Domi, with Kalle Järnkrok and Pontus Holmberg on his wings. David Kampf centers the fourth line with Connor Dewar and Ryan Reeves on his wings. Since the bulk of Toronto's scoring is going to be from their top 6, they don't need a ton of scoring from their bottom 6, so they will need some gritty players who can thrive in a shutdown role. Toronto's defense is anchored by Morgan Rielly. He is paired with Chris Tanev. This should be their shutdown pair. Their second pair at this moment is OEL and Timothy Liljegren, but I would be really shocked if this pairing sticks. Jake McCabe is going to be loved by Craig Berube and is currently paired with Simone Benoit on the third pair, making them an effective secondary shutdown pair. Both Jani Hakanpää and Connor Timmins are listed as right D, which indicates a possibility that Timothy Liljegren may get moved before the season due to cap constraints. Toronto will likely go with a 3-goalie rotation of Joseph Woll, Anthony Stolarz, and Matt Murray. The defense and goaltending is unquestionably the weakness of the team, but they still have some solid pieces to work with. The Toronto Maple Leafs will be among the early season favorites to win the Atlantic Division. However, with a new coach, less depth scoring, and an unproven goalie trio, I can't put them over Florida or Boston, who have established themselves as consistent contenders year in and year out. With that said, I think they will finish as the third best team in the division, battling with the Tampa Bay Lightning for the 3rd seed. The Tampa Bay Lightning have had a roster makeover this offseason, transforming their team by trading away Mikhail Sergachev to the Utah Hockey Club for defenseman J.J. Moser, forward Connor Geekie, and a 2nd-round pick in the 2025 NHL Draft, and a 7th-round pick in the 2024 NHL Draft. Although it was a tough decision to move on from Sergachev, a key member of 2 Stanley Cup winning teams and a defenseman that is still in his prime with untapped potential, trading him does free up $8.5 million in cap space, which they really needed to sign free agents. Before trading away Sergachev though, the Lightning stabilized their defense by reacquiring Ryan McDonagh from the Nashville Predators. Although McDonagh has a bad contract, he is still a top 4 defenseman and is familiar with Tampa's system. The biggest loss for the Lightning this offseason was of longtime captain Steven Stamkos, but they quickly replaced him with Jake Guentzel, who was signed to a 7-year deal at $9 million per year. Tampa also lost Anthony Duclair to free agency, but they replaced him with Cam Atkinson, and also added depth players such as Zemgus Girgensons and Jesse Ylonen. As per Daily Faceoff, Tampa Bay Lightning have a first line which consists of Nikita Kucherov, Braden Point, and Jake Gunsel, which is one of the best first lines in the entire NHL. This line will probably have the majority of the team scoring. The scoring drops off drastically afterwards, with Anthony Cirelli centering the second line with Brandon Hagel and Cam Atkinson. Then Nick Paul centers a third line with Connor Sheary and Michael Esamont. The fourth line is solid. It consists of Luke Glendening centering Zemgus Girgensons and Mitchell Chaffee. The strength of the team is their top-end firepower on offense, but their weakness is depth scoring. Victor Hedman anchors the Tampa Bay Lightning D-core and is paired with Darren Radish. This will be their shutdown pair. Ryan McDonough rejoins Eric Cernak to form their second D pair. This pair was a great secondary shutdown pair during their cup runs, but Cernak's injuries and McDonough's age leave much to be desired. Newcomer JJ Moser, acquired in the Mikhail Sergachev trade, is paired with Nick Perbix on the third pair. The defense is improved from last year and is considered a strength of the team. Andrei Vasilevsky will play the majority of games in goal, with Jonas Johansson playing the rest of the games. It is important to note that Vasilevsky had one of his worst seasons in the league. Statistically in the league since 2016-17, when he was still splitting goalie duties with Ben Bishop. So it is hard to imagine he has a worse season in 24-25. The Lightning remain a competitive team with a strong core and strong goaltending, making them a force to reckon with in the Atlantic Division. There is just a lot more uncertainty with this team than in years prior, because they will have a new captain and several new pieces to integrate to their team. With that said, I think that the top end talent they have is good enough to make them at worst a wildcard team and the fourth best team in the Atlantic Division. And if they perform really well, perhaps compete with Toronto for the third seed. Check out my hockey blog at hockeywiztalkshockey.blogspot.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at hockeywiz777. The Detroit Red Wings are another team in the Atlantic Division that had a huge roster turnover with many trades and signings that have changed the look of the team. Detroit lost a few key free agents, including veterans like Shane Gostisbehere, David Perron, and Daniel Sprong to free agency, and they also traded away defenseman Jake Wellman to San Jose and forward Robbie Fabry to Anaheim to clear cap space. Detroit re-signed forward Patrick Kane, who was a key player for them last year, to a one-year deal worth $4 million. Then signed Vladimir Tarasenko to a two-year deal worth $4.75 million per year. Detroit added some depth to the roster and signed Tyler Mott, Eric Gustafsson, as well as two goaltenders in Cam Talbot and Jack Campbell. The Red Wings have some key restricted free agents to sign, including Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, as well as Joe Veleno. Although the Red Wings do have more than $20 million in cap space to re-sign these key players, a large chunk of it will be used on Seider and Raymond. The overall goal of the Red Wings seems to be continuing their rebuild while adding pieces to compete for a playoff spot. The top six of the Red Wings is actually quite good. The first line has Dylan Larkin centering Lucas Raymond and Alex DeBrincat, while Patrick Kane will be the star distributor on the second line with JT Compher and Vladimir Tarasenko. Detroit basically has two checking lines. Andrew Copp centers the third line with Michael Rasmussen and Jonathan Begrin. This will be their primary shutdown line. And their secondary shutdown line and so-called fourth line is Joe Veleno centering Tyler Mott and Christian Fischer. Detroit has four solid lines, but it isn't anything to be impressed about, and much of their success will be dependent on how Tarasenko meshes with Patrick Kane. Because of the versatility of their top six and top end skill, the offense is a strength of the team. Moritz Seider is going to be the franchise defenseman for Detroit and is paired alongside Ben Sherratt. This will be their shutdown pair. Rookie Simon Edvinsson is poised for a big year and is paired with Jeff Petrie on the second pair. This is a huge gamble for Detroit, but if it pays off, the defense will be leaps and bounds better. The third D pair is quite underrated. Eric Gustafsson is paired with Olli Mata, and although Gustafsson could be a defensive liability 5-on-5, he provides great value on the power play. The defense is considered a weakness of the team because there is a lot of uncertainty and question marks about how this D-core will pan out. The Red Wings have four goaltenders in the equation, but Ville Husso, Cam Talbot, and Alex Lyon will likely operate in a trio capacity, with Jack Campbell starting in the minors and getting called up if needed. The Red Wings will likely be on the fringes of a playoff race like they were last season. Their success will likely hinge on the continued development of their young core and staying healthy. Detroit is not good enough to compete for a division spot yet, and are more likely in the same category of teams as the Senators and even the Sabres. Teams that have potential to be playoff teams, but there are question marks and uncertainty that you won't be able to answer in the offseason. The Ottawa Senators have been busy this offseason making some key moves to address their weaknesses. The first order of business this offseason for the Senators was improving their goaltending, and that they did, at least for this upcoming season, by acquiring Linus Ullmark from the Boston Bruins for goaltender Jonas Korpisalo, Mark Kastelik, and the 25th overall pick in the 2024 NHL Draft. This trade signals that the Senators intend on competing for a playoff spot next season. Ullmark is a proven starting goalie and even won the Vezina Trophy in 2023. He fills a major hole for Ottawa, who struggled in net last season. Jacob Chichurin, who had been in the center of trade rumors, was dealt to the Washington Capitals for defenseman Nick Jensen and a draft pick. While this is not a popular trade among fans, it allows the Senators to have two solid D pairs and a solid top four. David Perron, Zach McEwen, and Noah Gregor were signed in free agency to provide offensive depth for the team. The Senators decided not to qualify defenseman Eric Brandstrom, which made him a UFA. In doing so, however, this left a gaping hole on the third pair. After years of rebuilding, the Ottawa Senators are poised to take a significant leap in the 24-25 season, and perhaps even be in the mix to be a contending team, along with the Detroit Red Wings and a host of other teams who try to claim the final two wildcard spots. The top six of the Ottawa Senators is solid, and they can definitely put the puck in the net. The issue for them will be consistency beyond players like Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, and Claude Giroux, who form their first line. Although their second line of Shane Pinto, Josh Norris, and Drake Batherson is good, both Norris and Pinto are natural centers, so it will be quite an adjustment for the two players. And you just wonder if this line combo will stick. On the third line, you have Ridley Gregg with David Perron and Mike Amadio. It could be possible for either Pinto or Norris to swap with Ridley Gregg for better offensive depth. The fourth line is nice and heavy, featuring Zach Ostapchuk with Zach McEwen and Noah Gregor. The Ottawa Senators defense is okay but not spectacular. They have a top pair of Jake Sanderson and Artem Zub, and a second pair with Thomas Chabot and newly acquired Nick Jensen. The third pair is definitely the weakness of the defense, and is a work in progress. Jacob Bernard Docker is locked into his position as right D, and who his D partner is up for debate, as it could be one of Tyler Cleveland or Philip Rose. Ottawa would be wise to sign a veteran left D, just in case these two defensemen don't work out. Linus Ullmark will be the starting goalie for Ottawa, and is expected to bail out his subpar defense. Unfortunately for them, the goalie they saw in Boston is not the guy they are getting. The Atlantic Division is stacked, but the Ottawa Senators definitely do have a shot at a wildcard spot if Linus Ullmark plays like a Vezina Trophy goalie like he was in 22-23. Their star players take a gigantic leap forward, and Jake Sanderson becomes a true number one defenseman. Despite the offseason hype that the Ottawa Senators have received, I don't think they have done enough to be a contending team, and will very likely vie for a wildcard spot along with Detroit. The Buffalo Sabres have been busy this offseason, making some key moves to improve the roster. The major trade that Buffalo made was acquiring center Ryan McLeod and forward Tyler Toledo from the Edmonton Oilers for prospect Matt Savoy. This adds some depth and experience down the middle for Buffalo. The Sabres also signed forward Jason Zucker, Sam Lafferty, and Nicholas Abe-Kubel, along with goaltender James Reimer in free agency. Buffalo still needs to re-sign a few key RFAs, including netminder Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who established himself as the Sabres' number one goalie, Peyton Krebs, and Beck Malenstein, who was acquired from Washington. They will have $15.3 million in cap space to re-sign those key RFAs. Like Detroit, the overall goal of the team seems to be continuing their rebuild, while adding pieces to compete for a playoff spot. out of all the teams in the Atlantic Division. The top 6 of the Buffalo Sabres may be one of the most unproven and weakest. Tage Thompson, who had a down year last year after a 94-point campaign, centers a first line with Alex Tuch and JJ Peterka. Dylan Cousins, another player with a down year after a 31 campaign in 22-23, centers a line with Jason Zucker and Jack Quinn. I don't expect Jason Zucker to last in the top 6. It won't be long before Zach Benson becomes a fixture in the top 6. At this moment in time though, Zach Benson is on the third line with Ryan McLeod and Jordan Greenway, which should be a great third line. The fourth line is made up of new players, including 2 ex-Washington Capitals who were line mates, Beck Malenstein and Nicholas Abe-Kubo. The line will be centered by Sam Lafferty or Peyton Krebs. Although the top 6 of the Sabres isn't impressive, the depth of the team is, and the Sabres are capable of rolling all 4 lines. The defense is definitely the strength of the team, with a top 4 that is made up of Rasmus Dahlin, Bowen Byram, Owen Power, and Henry Jokiharju. Even the third pair is really good, with Connor Clifton and Matthias Samuelsson. Goaltending is also improved, with UPL tandeming with James Reimer. And if either of these 2 goalies get injured, Devin Levi is available to come up and take over goaltending duties. Lindy Ruff returns to Buffalo behind the bench. His experience and defensive focus could be a huge change for Buffalo. Although the Sabres may be a team on the rise, they have some hurdles that they need to overcome, as Buffalo doesn't have the firepower to compete with other teams in their division. The only way Buffalo becomes a playoff team is if they transform into an excellent defensive team that buys into a defensive-first approach. Listen to Hockey Wiz Talks podcast on Podbean and Spotify. Check out my travel channel at youtube.com/HockeyWizTravels. The Montreal Canadiens are poised for a long season in 24-25, as they are likely still 2 years away from contention. But the Montreal Canadiens should take a gigantic leap forward. Montreal is clearly the worst team in the Atlantic Division. They will likely finish near the bottom of the standings due to how much more improved the Atlantic Division is. The Montreal Canadiens drafted Ivan Demidov with a 5th overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft. He looks to be a core piece of the franchise when he chooses to join the team. Montreal did a good job of locking up forward Juraj Slafkovsky to an 8-year, $60.8 million extension. The reason why this is a good signing is because Slafkovsky had 20 goals and 50 points last season and really started to show why he was the number 1 overall pick towards the end of last season. If Slafkovsky were to have another great year in 24-25, the Canadiens would have to end up forking over more annually on a long-term deal. Montreal still has to re-sign Arbor Zyka, but with the log jam on defense, they may also look to trade him like they did with Jonathan Kovacevic. While the Montreal Canadiens have the weakest offense in the Atlantic Division, they do have some promising pieces that can put the puck in the net. The first line is centered by Captain Nick Suzuki with Juraj Slafkovsky and Cole Caulfield. This is going to be the line that scores the majority of their goals. Alex Newhook centers the second line with Brendan Gallagher and Kirby Dach. This line could surprise, especially if Newhook and Dach are able to live up to their draft expectations. The offense falls off a cliff after their top 6, as their bottom 6 is comprised of washed-up aging veterans on bad contracts. Christian Dvorak centers their third line with Josh Anderson and Alex Barry-Boulet. This is a nothing line and is a black hole in the lineup. The fourth line is a bit better, with Jake Evans centering Raphael Harvey-Pinard and Joel Armia. This will be the quote-unquote shutdown line. The strength of the Montreal Canadiens is that they have a bright prospect pool and some talented young players in the lineup, but their weakness is that they have one of the worst offenses in the league. Mike Matheson, who had a career year in 23-24, is paired alongside Caden Gooley to form the shutdown pair, while promising rookie defenseman Lane Hudson is paired with David Savard. Arbor Zyka is paired with Jordan Harris to round out the decor. Justin Barron will likely be the 7th defenseman for Montreal because they don't want to waste a year of Reinbacher's ELC unless he's playing top 4 minutes. Sam Montembeault and Caden Primo are the goalie tandem for Montreal and will bear the responsibility of holding down the fort in goal. Looking at the Montreal Canadiens heading into the season, the goal this year should be to help the young core players develop into NHL caliber players, and the rest of the players into reliable NHL talent. Since the Canadiens will likely be sellers come the trade deadline, they will be able to trade away veteran players like Michael Matheson, David Savard, Christian Dvorak, and Jake Evans to acquire more draft picks for upcoming drafts. While I expect a better season than last year, Montreal should still be the worst team in the Atlantic. In my next podcast, I'll be previewing the Metropolitan Division.